Good morning and Happy New Year 2026. If you're interested in books and reading and YouTube, like me, if you've looked at even one video about books and reading, then the algorithm gods have probably scattered many more in your path of books that people have read in 2025, books that people plan to read in 2026. And I thought I'd do my own kind of version of that. I am not someone who can make a video saying that you should read this or that, or you should read this way or that way, because I think reading is I think reading is unique to the person. I think different people read in different ways. From an outside observer, I am probably a terrible reader. Nevertheless, I'm curious about what people read. I'm curious about why they read what they read. So I thought I'd do my own version of this kind of a video by talking about the stack of books by my reading lamp. This is a stack of books that is currently by my reading lamp. It changes, it evolves. Books get removed, books get added. This is the current stack of books. So I'll start with this. Saul Bellow, Herzog. I've read almost all of his novels, and I've liked some of them very much. Some of them I've not liked as much. I've read them, and I hate to admit it, but forgotten them, and I've let the books pass out of my life. There's a few that I've liked very much. I still have copies of Mr. Samler's Planet, The Dean's December, I love very much. Henderson the Rain King, Humboldt's Gift. I've read that twice. But there have been two novels by Saul Bellow that I haven't been able to get into. One is The Adventures of Augie March, an early Bellow novel that I tried really hard, found it just difficult to identify with the character and focus on that novel. I still have a copy of it. It's on my shelf. This book, I find it difficult to really care about the main character of Moses Herzog. But at the same time, there's something about him I understand. I think what I really like is the conceit of the book. This is a man getting on in years, and this is kind of a reflection on his life, and it's in the form of he's going through some kind of personal crisis, and he's writing letters to people in his life. And I think that's an interesting form for a novel. Unfortunately, I just find it difficult to really care about Moses Herzog. And so I'll pick up the book and I'll read a few pages and I can get into his world. I don't have any trouble getting back into his world, but then I lose interest pretty quickly. But I'm not ready to give up yet. So it's on the bottom of the pile. Second, this beautiful copy of The Growth of the Soil. This was a library copy of the book. This was a library copy. Sorry. This was a library copy of the book. But it's a beautiful. I'm terrible at this. I'm sorry. I read The Growth of the Soil many, many years ago and loved it. And I've been wanting to read this novel again. So I got this. I'm going to read it again. This is the complete poems of Robert Frost. It's a nice copy. It's a nice cloth-bound copy. And copies of Frost kind of, fall from the trees. There's so many of them. Frost is an interesting poet. Your typical American doesn't know anything or give a shit about poetry. But if you went out and asked just, the random person, name one American poet, if they are able to name one, it's likely to be Robert Frost. Might be Emily Dickinson, might be Walt Whitman, might be Frank O'Hara, but chances are it'd be Robert Frost. I mean, most people know about The Road Not Taken. Is that the name of the poem? Two paths diverged in a wood. The path that the narrator takes makes all the difference. It's interesting. I'm really into John Berryman, the poet John Berryman, and Berryman thought Frost was the best. So I think it's interesting that I've been going through these a few at a time, and so far my favorites are the most well-known ones, and I wasn't expecting that. So next up. Every once in a while, I read one of these. These were articles that Flann O'Brien wrote for, what did he write this for? Shit. He wrote these for some Irish publication, newspaper. They're just humorous, satirical pieces. And they're so funny and so beautifully written. And when I want to laugh every once in a while, I read one of those. And then where I live, when I walk the neighborhoods, people have these little free library receptacles in their easements sometimes, where people just like to share books. And I came across this, the complete works of Rimbaud, and I have never read all of Rimbaud's poems. And so I'm reading all of them now, and I'm happy to read them. And so that's a neat thing. Here we go. A nice, big, great art book on Philip Guston. Philip Guston is a painter that I really, really love. Robert Storr, he might not be the best writer, but he's somebody who's been familiar with Philip Guston's work for many, many years. And the color reproductions in this book are really, really outstanding. Now this book, In the American Grain by William Carlos Williams. This is the one book in my stack that I feel a little bit guilty about. See, these are books in my stack that I dip in and out of. And this is really a book that I think deserves focus and attention. Because this book was conceived and executed on I think a very high intellectual order. And I'm not exactly sure what Williams is doing here. I'm not sure how much of this book is paraphrase. I get the impression that some of this book was some of this book just quoted verbatim from the original sources? I'm not really sure how much of it is completely original. And so because I'm not completely sure what Williams is doing, he's kind of like, he's kind of revealing what's just underneath the skin of being an American, and saying this is where it all comes from, and exposing the roots of it. And this is a book I think deserves a lot more study than I've been giving it. I have two books by Maurice Blanchot here. The Infinite Conversation. This is a long book for Blanchot. A lot of his books are shorter than this, and most of his books are collections of short pieces. This is a book, and it's like 500 pages long. And this is a book that I'm slowly getting into. I read a couple of Blanchot books last year. This is another Blanchot book that's on my list. Now this is a very short one. This is an example of Blanchot's fiction. And this is a book that I want to save, that I want to fall deeply into and read very carefully from start to finish. Now I need to mention one other Blanchot book, The Writing of the Disaster. This is not on the stack, but this is a book that's on my bookshelf that I have marked nearly every page of. And this is a book that I reach for constantly. This is a book that I'm always reading. And if I were to name a small collection of the most important books in my life ever, of all time, this would be on the short list. And that brings me to my Pessoa books. I have a copy of Richard Zenith's biography of Fernando Pessoa. This came out in 2021. When this book came out, I was afraid of it. I stayed far away from this book. I didn't want to know. I wanted to preserve the mystique of Pessoa. I was afraid to read this book. But then last year, well, for reasons that I'm not going to go into, I decided that I wanted to know something about the man. Why? How could this man live his whole life and write the way that he wrote, and just fling these things on random slips of paper into a trunk to be forgotten, mostly unpublished? How did he do that? How did he live? And I found myself curious about that, and I started reading this book. I started reading this book exactly 1 year ago. I've left off. I left off on page 400, which seems like a lot, but this book is over 1,000 pages long. I'm only up to 1914. 1914 was the year that Pessoa created his three primary poet heteronyms. All of them, Quero, Campos, and Reis, all three of them came out in 1914. Like, boom, wow. And that's where I've left off. Just before that, Pessoa was still in his 20s. When he was 21 years old, he came into control of a small inheritance It was not a lot of money, but it was enough money that if he had arranged his life carefully, he could have lived modestly but comfortably. And when I read that, I thought, okay, I've got Pessoa figured out now. I know what he did. Yeah, he didn't have to work too hard. He didn't have to worry about his next meal too much. Hey, perfect solution for an artist. He didn't even have to publish. He had money. He could live. He had enough money for his food. He had enough money to rent a modest flat. He had his cigars. He had his whatever he liked to drink every day in those cafes. But Pessoa didn't do that. He bought a printing press and rented a place and tried to start his own publishing company and blew the entire inheritance, the whole thing. I'm like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. And so I'm just kind of allowing myself to hang on that cliffhanger of like, wow. And so also on my stack, I have the selected prose of Pessoa. Occasionally I'll read one of those. And I have this collection of his poems, also translated by Richard Zenith. I'm reading these. I have this one, also translated by Zenith. The poems that aren't in the other collection are in this one, and I'm reading these. And I have this beautiful New Directions paperback of the poems of Alvaro de Campos. Probably my favorite of Pessoa's poet heteronyms, other than Pessoa himself. I'm happy to have this book, but the problem with this New Directions paperback is there's no table of contents. So I think that's a really bad choice. So I had to create my own table of contents. And then finally, Leon Bloy. This is a beautiful, beautiful Wakefield Press paperback published in 2015. Disagreeable Tales by Leon Bloy. Right now, this is on the top of the pile. Now, that will probably change in a day or two. Leon Bloy is an interesting case. When I was very young, and I was obsessed with Maldoror, as I still am, I noticed that one of the writers that he was constantly compared to was Leon Bloy, and I thought, well, any writer that is going to be associated with the name of Lautréamont has got to be a writer that I'm going to check out. Unfortunately, at the time, there was not a lot of Bloy in English translation, and my French is terrible. So I recall flipping through an English translation of Pilgrim of the Absolute once in a library when I was like 21 years old. But after that, for decades, literally, Leon Bloy has just been a name for me. And, I know the basic facts, that he was a devout Catholic, but he was insufferable and incendiary and offensive. And I thought, wow, how can somebody be a Catholic and all of those things and be compared to Lautréamont? Who is this monster? Well, fortunately, in recent years, his books have been coming out in English translations. And so I have this one. And my bookmark is these are short pieces, and my bookmark is on the 11th piece, The Stroker of Compassion. And this is an English translation by Eric Butler. And it just starts like this. I met him in 1864 when he was barely a youth. We lived together for more than 20 years, and I loved him as one rarely loves a brother. Paragraph 2. Today, now that the unfortunate man has descended a bit lower than the dead, I can well say I was a most diligent, attentive, and devotional teacher. Paragraph 3. Everything good in his poor soul, which now lies as barren as the granaries of famine, he received from my lips. He was fed like the hatchlings of night birds, terrified of the light. Now, this is an English translation, but this image is so strong, I'm sure it just came right through. And it's so striking. It's so uncommon. I mean, really. How often do you read such a striking image as this? I'm going to read that third paragraph again. It's just a few words. Everything good in his poor soul, which now lies as barren as the granaries of famine, he received from my lips. He was fed like the hatchlings of night birds, terrified of the light. And with that, I put the bookmark in the book and I close the book, and I just want to let that soak in. I just want to let that soak in. And I don't know when I'm going to get back to that, really. That's all I need right now. And so I don't recommend that people read the way that I read. The way that I read is completely unique to who I am, but it works for me. And those are the books on the pile by my reading lamp right now.